All right, welcome, Russ. Tell us who you are, what you do.
G'day, guys. So my name's Russ. I'm a co-founder and general manager of a performance marketing agency called Impressive, based in Austin, Texas. I've worked in sales and marketing for 15, 20 years. I've led sales teams, built sales teams for the last sort of 10 or 12 years. And I love selling and I love marketing. So, that sort of crossover there is what I enjoy doing. And in terms of, what was the question? It was around Chinese.
Yeah. What would you order for Chinese tonight?
Yeah, cool. It would be a toss up between Mongolian beef or Cantonese beef. I'm always sort of one of those two.
Okay. Eloise.
All right. Hi, everybody. So my name is Eloise Leeson, and I founded Olim, which is a linguistics-based communications consultancy. And I do a lot of work helping people close the gap between what we think we're saying and what is actually received by our customers. Do a lot of work in cybersecurity and biosciences and lots of technical stuff, but also like working with the vegan startups, not being a vegan, but still all good. And when it comes to the Chinese order, it varies between hardcore char siu bao cravings and then anything that involves lo mein of some kind. Like if it's a carbohydrate and I can put it in my face, I'm done.
Love it.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yes, Patrick Downs. I am currently a mid-market account executive at an HR tech company called Sapling. Over the last 3 years, I was building out the sales enablement program and managing sales teams at PandaDoc. Back in the sales seat. My Chinese food order, the bao bun sounds really good right now, but the gochujang twice fried wings at my local spot are unbelievable. And I'm probably getting those tonight.
All right, Ricky, before I hand it over to you, I'm Francois. I work for Encore Business Solutions by day. By night, I'm an aspiring parent, but mostly failing parent. Chinese food, ginger beef. I don't know. I don't. Is it as big down in the US? I think it's a Canadian invention.
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
never heard of it from Australian perspective either.
Yeah, it's so bright. I think it's not healthy, but it's delicious. So, Ricky, I'll hand the baton over to you. Tell us what you do, how we can help you today, and your favorite Chinese food order. I think you are on mute.
Am I?
There you go.
Okay, cool. Great to meet you guys. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Ricky Houck, and most of my background is actually in creative content production, working with brands and agencies. And for the last 8 months or so, I've been working here at Touchcast, helping brands to produce virtual experiences. And so JJ was kindly introduced me to you guys to get some feedback on the pitch and kind of see if we can fine tune some things. I was thinking that we can keep it relatively standard. I was just going to do kind of a general walkthrough of the capabilities, and then would love to hear kind of if there's a better flow to it, if there's things that might be reordered a little different, if there's parts that might need a little more explanation than others, just making sure that there's a good flow to it and that things are clear. Before getting into any of that though, I always like to get a little baseline just of like how much people know about the space. I think is always a good starting point. I saw some of you have been guest speakers and kind of run accelerator programs and things like that, but how much do you guys know about the event space or these kind of virtual event platforms?
I mean, I'd be shocked if none of us haven't done a virtual event in the last 2 years, because that's kind of all we've had, but I think they probably vary in terms of experience, but that's me speaking.
I think from my corner, I find that, and I don't know if it's a British thing, I'm almost definitely sure it's not a British thing and just a Luddite thing, but really very little in the way of sort of virtual event spaces. I'm not sure that it's quite caught on over here in the UK market, and I think that probably a lot of people would find it a little bit too much in certain ways, but that being said, really looking forward to finding out more. Really, I think Zoom, I don't know if anyone else has just experienced, people have tried to make Zoom fit a virtual event rather than thinking about how it can be more immersive. I don't know if anyone else has encountered that at all.
Yeah, I was going to say that over the last 2 years, just like everyone else, I've been involved in a bunch of virtual events, a lot of them via Zoom, where it's really reliant on like a facilitator to be creative and to engage and that sort of thing. And that can be hit or miss. I think I've been involved in one or two for different platforms, not Touchcast, where it has opened my eyes a little bit, and I have thought, oh wow, I never thought that that would be a thing. So I'm certainly interested to find out a bit more about how the technology brings to life what can sometimes be a bit of a dry experience.
Yeah, I've used like Big Marker and a couple of those, and I've done a lot of events over the last 2 years, so a little bit familiar.
Awesome. Good that everyone's got a little bit of a baseline, kind of been around a bit. And Russ, I saw you actually used to work in the wedding industry. And there's, I don't know if you saw the news, but there was actually a wedding that took place in the Metaverse last week.
Oh,
So
didn't know
this
that.
is like a really hot topic right now of just digital communications becoming a bigger and bigger part of our daily lives in general, right? So in the B2C world, having the Metaverse start to take off and Facebook's rebrand and seeing that gain some traction is really interesting. On Touchcast side of things, we're not trying to necessarily have everyone put on VR goggles and go off into the virtual world, but we do think that it's time that we kind of level up these virtual experiences from a standard Zoom call. So we're in these meetings all day, every single day, just like this one, where we're in our home office and there's kind of these 2D boxes with heads kind of talking at you. And we're just not seeing a lot of other platforms do anything more immersive to make that really special. So that's our whole kind of differentiator and kind of where Touchcast comes in. Like what you see behind me is our Touchcast virtual arena, which is essentially, think of it like a virtual venue that brands can rent out. We can actually move our logo and put a different brand's logo on there and kind of throw their branding into the venue. But first I'm going to move into kind of what a session looks like and then show you how people access it. So again, I'm in my home office just like the rest of you right now, sitting kind of in my living room. But what you're going to see here is almost like a black box theater. This was the first stage we created for Bloomberg a few years ago. And it was actually really focused on learning and development presentations. So a lot of internal communications, not just the big kind of external marketing conferences. But there's a couple things where the magic starts to happen here. One is that you get a three-dimensional venue that can incorporate branding, and you have these kind of moving avatars to make it feel a little bit more lifelike. But the other piece is that I can actually have multiple camera angles running at the same time. So I can actually cut from camera 1 to camera 2. If I have a slide deck that I'm walking through in real time, I can cut to a different angle that makes that a little bigger on the screen and focuses on it a little more. Great example, which I'm sure all of you have experienced in your time doing these kind of demo days and sessions, is panel discussions where you might have a Q&A, you might have different people answering questions. Great opportunity to cut in on the person providing insight, reestablish the panel again. So it really does function a lot kind of like a TV broadcast, almost thinking like you have like a full AV crew, except for instead it's all taking place with our technology. So it's a lot more scalable and kind of easier to manage it when you're doing these kind of virtual productions. That's actually a piece of feedback we've been getting a lot, is some of these Fortune 500s have built multi-million-dollar studios that they could not even access during COVID. So you've got like a $10 million studio production and a full team of videographers and producers, and they can't even come together to produce anything. Something that I think as speakers might resonate. I don't think I have the ability to share my screen.
Let me do that right now. Yeah, you're good.
There we go. So similar to like the lack of production crew that you need to run one of these, the other piece of it is for a speaker, you don't want them to have to download new software, learn a bunch of new tools. You don't want it to be really complicated for the actual speakers either. So in this case, you'll see 3 different speakers from 3 different parts of the world. And all they have to do is dial into a Microsoft Teams call, and you're going to see the inputs at the bottom of what the speakers are experiencing. And then in the background, you'll see the output of what the audience experiences in this branded kind of epic conference hall. And even if I think there's going to be an angle in a second where you see this little water bottle on the screen, in reality, that doesn't exist, right? There is no water bottle, but it's that attention to detail to kind of really make people visually kind of fall into the world that we've created for them. The other piece of this outside of the actual sessions that I think is important is how people access the content in the first place. So the sessions and like having more immersive presentations is super important, but how someone actually navigates and gets to that session is also important. And some of the other competitors that are doing kind of virtual sessions at the moment, they kind of make you build an avatar. And it's almost like playing a video game where you got to move around and find where your session is. Really cool. It can be a little cheesy sometimes. And the bigger issue is that people get lost. It almost feels like you're in a casino in Vegas where it's like, wait, where am I going? Where's the next session? How do I actually get to my presentation? So the approach we decided to take was actually to simplify it, make it more like a Netflix-like kind of video streaming platform, but still incorporate these beautiful colors and branding opportunities where you can incorporate the video in the top right or the logo in the top left, and then incorporate your colors behind the title cards and kind of your central hub of resources and whatnot, to make it a little bit more easy to navigate for the end user. And then the last piece that I think is really important is for this content to live on after the content's been produced, right? So there's the idea of a live session, but then what happens to the content after the event is over? And so one piece is that you have this kind of bingeable experience similar to Netflix, but the other thing is we're built on an AI technology that's actually going to chapterize all the content. So you'll see these different scenes at the bottom, and then transcribe and create these interactive articles where all the content actually is not only broken down into this table of contents, but the article also is interactive with the video. So if I have an hour-long session, maybe I don't want to go watch the whole thing, but I can skim this article, quickly find the text that stands out to me, and then I can skip to that portion of the video very easily. So the idea is not just to produce really immersive live sessions, but also to make the content more usable after the fact. So let's say you have a big conference with like 1,600 sessions or something like that. If you wanted to transcribe and create trailers and create a blog post for every single session, the amount of hours it would take for you to manually do that is insane. Versus with the AI, it's automatically done right away. And then if you want to come in and make edits to your core keynotes and things like that, then you can just hop in here and make some adjustments.
So who?
Go for it.
No, go, Ricky. I guess I'm curious. Like, if let's say Russ was someone who had reached out, or you had reached out to Ricky, like, who are you typically talking to? Like, who are you typically talking to as a buyer? Is it someone from events or marketing?
Yeah, so there's a few categories. I'd say events, like event managers, event marketers are probably the #1 focus. I think this hits the closest to home for them. They've been feeling the problem, but they've also spent the last 2 years trying virtual platforms and trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So I think they understand it better, and it resonates with them. But what we're also finding is there's a lot of use cases with like learning and development for diversity and inclusion teams and HR teams that want to do something better than a typical LMS, like essentially anything that has a webinar type production value. This gives them an opportunity to do something better than that, and provide a more engaging experience for their viewers.
And where do you find, like, maybe, you know, let's say Russ or Eloise were from the marketing team and they've been, you know, given the MO that, you know, all events are still virtual for 2022 and they don't want to do just a GoToMeeting or a Zoom. They want to differentiate. Do you find, like, where are they maybe kind of getting hung up? Is it too cutting edge, or is it cost? Is it there are a lot of technical hurdles, like, or is there no objection? There's just a lineup of people waiting to buy.
Well, if only that was the case, right? No, there's always some struggles, right? So one thing that I've found with financial companies, which is one of our sweet spots, is sometimes we do have to downplay the technology a little bit because they want to look really clean, really professional, nothing too flashy. Like, there's actually an example here that I have not shown you yet, where we can do like concerts like this one with will.i.am, where you actually have a DJ set where the DJ booth flies up into the air because we don't have to deal with real world physics anymore, and we can do whatever we want, right? And some pharmaceutical companies and some financial companies are really into that, but a lot of the time we do have to downplay some of those things. I think the biggest hurdle is just cost, as it can be really expensive when we're providing the fully managed services in addition to the technology. And to put on one of these events, I mean, you're talking probably a 2 to 3 month lead time and a full service of event managers and producers. And so for marquee events and for the big projects that really warrant the investment, it makes a lot of sense. But for a lot of the demand gen folks focused on day-to-day webinars, I think it's a little bit of a jump from a Zoom call or a Teams call that's essentially free.
Yeah, because I'm guessing when people, sorry, Eloise, I thought you were going to jump in though, but when I think virtual, I'm thinking like price point. I've done in-person events and they're not inexpensive. When I think virtual, I'm thinking like pretty low barrier to entry.
Well, but that is where I think, and this is what I get excited about the future state of where Touchcast is going, is that is a mindset that needs to change, right? Because now we're spending more than 50% of our time on digital, communicating digitally. And so there's companies that have spent millions of dollars building an executive briefing center, as an example, where you've got this crazy flashy building with really cool LCD screens, and you fly in the CMO of your top customers to come check out this space. But now everyone's digital. People don't necessarily want to travel and make that investment. Maybe they don't feel comfortable or safe doing it. There's a lot of hurdles to get people to actually come in person nowadays. And so why not spend a couple $100,000 to create an immersive experience digitally, where you have a digital twin of that real building, or something more creative that's actually used 24 hours a day because it's accessed online, and then also translatable in all these different languages. Like, I think that's a mindset that hasn't fully been adopted, but we're in the process of seeing that shift happen.
If I could jump in,
Yeah.
I think that what you're speaking to there is like something I'd be driving home a lot more, like early on, like, because I'm the same as Francois. I think, okay, well, you've got, and I'm thinking about an event manager, event producer, event marketer, and they've usually got, X amount, these big budgets every year. And then, everything's remote, and I'm sure they're scared of that big budget getting shrunk for these Zoom events. But, an angle for you, or like is for them to look past, okay, well, this is COVID normal 2021, 2022. This is the future of where this is going. Those events that you had can be amazing through a platform like this. And it's a really good opportunity for you to separate from these other, whether it's internal or external, whether we're talking about, training your staff internally or these external facing events. There's like a finite window. I feel like every now and then there's these little windows where you can see the future there. Not everyone else is going to see it just yet. Why don't we just really sell that future, that gap, before everyone else jumps on and goes, holy, sorry, should I swear?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
I
Holy
swear
shit.
all the time. Don't worry about
Cool.
it.
Holy shit, I had $1 million marketing budget. They want to make it $100,000. But there's an opportunity for us to really use that event budget really, really well, separate from everyone else in this short period of time, and get good at it as well. Because as user-friendly as this is, I imagine the people who get on now, the early adopters, are going to figure out ways to really hone it to a point that really separates them. So that's something I'd be really honing in on very early, before you even get into a lot of how cool it is. And, it looks amazing, but I think sort of drilling into that, the fear of potentially losing that budget, and the gap where they can get in ahead of other people and separate.
Well, and what's interesting about that, just to try and riff off taking that feedback for something I can kind of implement, is I think that bringing that piece of the story up earlier in the conversation also susses out what type of person I'm selling to, right? Like, are they the type of person that really resonates with that message, and they actually are just as excited, and maybe they actually are coming up with their own ideas on the spot of how it could start to be used and where it could go? Or are they the type of person that shrivels up at that a little bit and starts to get a little bit like, whoa, we're actually focused on in person and other things? And that would help guide what to focus on with the rest of the presentation a little bit.
And just on that note, I think that what's so exciting about this is, obviously it's very much B2B in terms of your sales and what you're doing right now, but actually there is an end user there. There's the attendee of the event as well. What I'd love to know is, what's the impact of experiencing an event in Touchpoint instead? And what's the, do you have a metric or a measurement that says, actually, we get so much more attendance online than we do in person, because people can't crap out and say they didn't arrive because traffic was bad. So your attendance levels suddenly have gone up by 33.8%, and that's amazing. You suddenly have all these amazing metrics in terms of, say, your learning and development, your diversity and inclusion, your HR, your onboarding, all of these experiences. If you have metrics that show that, I think, to show that you're thinking about the attendee, that end customer. So really it's B2B2C now, that you're looking at that end person. And kind of, I think, well, certainly if I was an event manager, my focus is on, is the person coming to the event that I'm going to run going to leave with their mind absolutely blown, which is what this offers in terms of opportunity. And I think when you get off I think we all have scripts and narratives, and certainly that's not the way this comes across and the way it sounds, but you get really passionate and you have this kind of this facial expression when you start to talk about the other possibilities. And obviously that will come out when you personalize the pictures that you do. But it's just really nice to see that come out as you're talking about so you're clearly really passionate about this. And I think then thinking about what does that mean for that end user is a really exciting way to present in terms of flow, potentially.
Yeah, so just what I kind of am hearing there is that, like, why is it important to the event manager, right? Like, the event manager's ease of experience to produce the event is one thing, but what they really care about is the attendance they're going to get, how engaged those attendees are, what the experience is. And so what I'm finding is that there's kind of three stakeholders involved in an event, right? There's the person running it, and like, are they going to have a good time running it? Which in our case is interaction with the technology if they're a self-service customer, interaction with our services if they're a fully managed service customer. But then there's the attendee, and there's also the speaker. Like, if we're onboarding, like, especially if you're dealing with an internal event management team, like, they have to bring on their CTO for a technology conference. And if their CTO has a bad experience with whatever platform they chose, or whatever vendor they chose, that reflects really poorly on them. And so I think the speaker experience is also something that's really, really important too.
So I think what I was hearing there too, because I was helping with some events several years ago. And so it's like, you want to paint the picture of the art of the possible and get them excited. But ultimately, what I remember dealing with a lot of the marketing folks is they had these very specific like metrics, like, you know, will we get some leads? What kind of engagement? Like, so you kind of have to, what I was hearing from Eloise is you kind of had to dial it back to that as well. Like, what are those, tangibles? But I'm curious from the group, like when I heard Ricky say Metaverse at the beginning, there was a reaction in my mind where just certain things were firing. And I'm curious, like when everyone heard that, did they go, cool, I can't wait to join? Or what did he just say? And I wonder what the reaction of some of your potential customers are, right? Are they like, yeah, we got to get on there, or none of our customers know what that is? That was a big blurb to everyone, but. No,
I was going to speak to that as well. And I wonder, and I get that. Actually, there's a question for you, Ricky. When you're going through this demo, usually, is it to 4 or 5 people? Is it to one person? Like, how does this usually look for you?
It's almost never one person. So minimum, I'd say 2 or 3, and then sometimes as many as 9 or 10.
Okay, cool. So this isn't foreign to you, to a group like this. Things like that, the metaverse, and there was a couple of other points you made around, hours of preparation saved, with all the technology that's backed into it. And the field functions like a TV production. I just feel like there's really key points for engagement there, where you should really be picking your mark on, metaverse. Pause. Eloise, what are your thoughts on that? You know what I mean? And really just start to make it a conversation, because the way it presents, or today was more like a presentation as opposed to a conversation. You're obviously really excited about it. You're infectious. Your passion for it. It'd be great that infection. Probably bad time to use that analogy, but that infection would be much more powerful if you were, sparking that engagement one by one through us. And then you can also start to pick your mark on, okay, well, here's a direction. They're really interested in how user-friendly this is from the back-end side. Maybe I'll let them drive for a second, and just picking your mark on how to take this, further forward.
Because you then have an opportunity, and I'm going to be obnoxious and use the term meta-linguistics, but you have the opportunity to make this literally meta on the subject of metaverse. You can bring them into a touch point experience. You can bring them into what they could be experiencing for themselves. And then when you start that conversation, that dialogue, you're giving them the sense of, oh no, I'm here, I'm in person, I'm having, I'm immersed in what's going on. And exactly as Russ was saying, you have this opportunity to forge something that's really dynamic. So when you start getting them involved and they're having this experience, they're signing on without even realizing what's going on. You're kind of priming them at the same time. And I dare say that's probably a large part of what you do anyway, Ricky. But I think that's really powerful for us, yeah, for sure.
Those are really good points, and this might be a weird analogy, but I'm a film guy in my background, so bear with me. Something that always bothered me about 3D movies is that they tried to get an audience immersed by like throwing stuff out at you, which is the opposite of immersion. It's like taking you out of the movie back into the theater. But there's a few select films that took the opposite approach of trying to layer the 3D back into the screen and focus really on the borders and like how could they pull you into the experience. And so I feel like when I am too presentational or and I kind of product dump a little bit, then it turns into a lot of this is coming out at you, versus the way that you guys are describing these kind of little tips and tricks is like ways to pull people in. And because of the nature of what I'm selling with Touchcast, it actually amplifies these 3D venues and kind of that immersiveness.
Yeah, and I guess when you said, finance, I think, did you say pharma as well? I heard conservative. So then, in my mind, I'm going metaverse, finance. I was like, are they like, we got to get there? We feel like we're maybe laggards, or are they going, whoa, that's like the DJ? What's happening? So I'm curious, like, are you finding in those conversations, they're really curious and feel like they need to catch up, or it's really a tough kind of almost like cultural sale or conversation?
It's very hit or miss. And that's why I really liked or really appreciated Russ's feedback on trying to bring that story to the beginning of the conversation, because I found that about half the time they're really, really excited and they're like, how do I get my organization on board with this? And it's less about them seeing the value and more about how do we help them play the politics of getting the rest of the team to see the value, because it is such a polarizing topic. And then the other half the time, someone's like very checked out on that idea. It is very much like, okay, but like they more value the translations and the AI components of the articles and the efficiencies that they're getting versus the wow factor that they're getting. And so I think sussing that out at the beginning of the conversation and starting there versus trying to end there would help a lot in flowing the conversation better.
And Eloise mentioned this just earlier, and I think you already alluded to, you've done this. Like, it sounds like it's pretty easy to pull them into an experience. Like, you could send them to a URL, because it doesn't sound like they need to download anything. And next thing you know, they could essentially be experiencing one on the fly.
Well, so the tricky thing there is and this is actually a selling point for the ease of use for speakers, but it does make it difficult in the pre-sale process on how we showcase it. So when a speaker jumps on a Touchcast call, they're just hopping on a Zoom call or a Teams call like we're on today. And I don't know if you guys use Gong or any of these plugins, but basically the Touchcast director will show up as a attendee on that call. Mm-hmm. So for the presenters, it's very intimate. Like, they're not experiencing anything different than a normal call, but their video feed is then being pulled into the Touchcast production platform, where we then present them out to the rest of the audience. So I have been asked that question before of like, can we see a speaker experience? What's my speaker going to experience? And it's kind of difficult to explain sometimes just because of how simple it is. So I always like to show that town hall example to give them the like input versus output. But sometimes mechanically there's a disconnect of like, but how does it get from there to there? And that can be a little hard to explain.
I don't even think they need to know how. I think even just like if you explain what you did then, and then they jump in, they log in, and they do the presenter, and you ask them, so what do you see there? Can you? And they'll say, oh, just me in a box. Great. Is that distracting? Can you focus? Yep, cool. Well, guess other guys, what can you guys see? Oh, we can see big screen. We can see all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Then they're actually, rather than you describing it to us, of see how this is here and all this is happening, you get them to start doing the pitch for you. So you're actually getting them to really buy into it. Oh, wow, that's great. And see how that, oh yeah, and I only saw this. So you're really leveraging, it's kind of like, all the answers already, right? So why bother sharing all the answers that are there? Why don't you just drop little breadcrumbs here and there and just let them start giving you the answers. And that's when they start buying in.
Well, especially when you have large groups, right? Because you get the experience of, even if it's one or two speakers, there's almost always another group of people that can react to it. So that's a really good point.
Eloise.
And it's great as well, because they also have that, it's almost like a trusted reaction from your colleagues. So you're forging on what is effectively now a hot lead, because, obviously they're a hot lead in the first place, but now that it's coming from that sort of personal experiential, it's not you telling them how great it is. It's someone they've worked with, they've trusted, they've known for a long time. They're going to use language that you can pick up on in the future as well. That will say like, oh, actually, this looks amazing. This is so much better than that last event that we had. All of a sudden, you have more insight and information from their reactions as well. So it's going to give you an idea of where to hone in on in the rest of the pitch as well, if that becomes necessary. But yeah, Russ, brilliant. Love it.
I'm wondering too, Ricky, about like earlier on, you were saying one of the objections, if you will, is cost, because this is what I would describe as like a premium product. But I wonder if it's also a total like differentiation or reframe. So you have physical events, which or a category, if you will, and they have, gold, platinum, whatever. And then I think if people are comparing this to the simple Zoom webinar they've spun up, it's always going to be a disconnect. So I'm just wondering how the best way is to like get out, like go away from that even being a comparison right out of the gate.
So I think that's something that, especially this most recent couple months, now that I've had some time to ramp up, I've been a little more confident in my knowledge of the space and kind of trying to reframe some of those talk tracks. And what the challenge is that most of these event managers are very familiar with like the hop-ins and the Zooms and the Teams. And so it's very easy for the conversation to start there because that's what their experience is. Where I find Touchcast is with better comparison though is less with the hop-ins of the world. I think they're a very different use case. I think we're more comparable to like Freeman or George P. Johnson or some of the really big agencies. And they might be charging you, $1 million a day for a relatively straightforward 1 or 2 track event. And we might charge a fourth of that because we can provide this level of immersion with the technology we've created. And that's where the technology you start to see monetary value to it, because it's like, oh, whoa, it takes an agency all these extra design hours and all this extra work. That all gets cut down really, really quickly. And they start to see us as affordable for something premium versus seeing us really expensive for something leveled up. So that's kind of where I've been experimenting with it, but that's a more recent discovery of mine.
Just if you are heading down that path, just make sure you're probably doing this, I'm sure, but make sure you are actually asking the event marketers or the event producers if that is their experience of George P. Johnson, or like, so that they're actually, because to me, like what you said then, a couple of things I wasn't 100% sure on. Like, are you saying that George P. Johnson do those events virtually, or is that at that price, or is that the comparison to a live event at that price? So I think just some,
yeah.
There you go. I didn't know that. So I guess just gauging the their experience and their level and sort of framing it that way, because as you say, if that's a like for like in terms of the end product and yours is a quarter of the price or whatever it is, then that's pretty well positioned.
Well, and a question for the group on that, because the other tricky thing, and I dealt with this in my past life with photo and video production too, is that there's this whole world of agencies that fit into the model, right? There's platforms, there's agencies, then there's the internal teams. And agencies aren't something that we want to really turn into a direct competitor, because we want to play nice with them. Like we want to be a platform of choice for them. We want to enable them to actually do more. Like we don't want to make an enemy out of the agency group. And so it's kind of difficult to navigate the talk track, because we don't want to necessarily say we're replacing agencies, because that's not the end goal either. Like we would love for our technology to get to a point where agencies are actually one of our primary customers that are signing up and selling their services on top of the platform, right? So how do you balance that comparison without making an enemy out of them?
Eloise, you look like you have a thought there, and I'll jump in quick, because what I've been reading lately, and I don't know if anyone saw, there was an article that Gong put out about sales. The data anyway that they had was that if you use the deck, your conversion rate was lower. And I've also been reading the book about working backwards about how Amazon got rid of visual, like no decks internally. I'm a really visual person. And obviously, Ricky, like there's no way you can do what you're doing today here without showing something. But where I was going is, like in my mind right now, I'd love to see almost like not a grid, but something that kind of positioned where you are and where the agencies fit and where low budget fits, like kind of in a grid or a quadrant or something. And I think that would be kind of a nice level set to start things off, to say, hey, here's where we are. And then I think you could also put the agencies as, aside as a complementary, they're our friends and they're not, in this competitive. So I'm just wondering what the group thinks. And I'm still not sold that we can't use decks. I just think you got to be careful with them. But anyway, that was a whole kind of tangent, but I don't know what anybody's thinking. Like, would that have helped at the very beginning to say, hey, here's where we are in kind of some visual format?
So visually, I think that's a brilliant idea, and it sort of takes slightly the wind out of my sails of saying, look, why don't you just paint a picture of where events are right now? And I think that actually also helps us ground people on the whole idea of metaverse and what does that look like? Because to me, it terrifies me, the idea that we might lose human connection. And I'm a real sort of Luddite, as I said earlier. I'm someone who really values in-person connection. And there's obviously a place for that virtually, but be able to say that, at the moment there were, say, X amount of virtual events held that generated X amount of revenue, X% of companies have now looked to this and this. Agencies have provided X amount, but we've actually seen a decline over the last 2 years in agency-led events. So our vision for the future for the event space, not just for you as a client, potential client, but our vision for the event space is to work hand in hand with amazing agencies that will help you and support you in person. And we want to be the complement to something that is so immersive online. And I think that when you get into that space where you're able to paint this picture about events in general, you're not talking about agencies as being something where you can piss them off. You're actually talking about, let's paint a picture of where we are collectively at large. And I think that's much safer because you're not directing anything at any one person, but you're still making the point in a very elegant way that says, haha, you need us because we're really, really good at what we do.
I love that. I love that because it also speaks to you're taking the higher ground in that you just want online events, virtual events to be amazing. You're like, your vision is for them to just be like, they're here now. We want them to be right here. Like with some of those creative agencies have got like the most talented, incredibly talented people. Geez, if we could work with them, we all level up. And then, as an industry, and if you think about the people you're speaking to as well, event producers, they're creative people who are used to doing amazing things, tangible things. Like you really speak to their inner desire to create beautiful, amazing experiences. So you can do that in a way which complements just by taking that step back and talking about virtual events as a whole and how we can all lift that. And I think a visual at the start is a great way to do that.
Eloise, for some reason, I don't know why in my mind, I have this visual in my mind now that starts on the left-hand side and it has a caveman or cave person. And,
yeah.
And then we have Metaverse here. And so what's in the middle?
Just becoming a Mobius strip. Yeah, love it.
I don't know what's there, but I'm also thinking, like, is there kind of an analogy you could help paint the picture? And, you probably have to have a different visual for a different audience because some people are already there, but you might need like, kind of like, what was pre-YouTube and like, some of these things now are normal to us. But before, we would laugh at, like, if, I don't know, 10 years ago, we said we'd be watching TV on YouTube, we'd probably like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? So some of those technological shifts now are just commonplace.
Well, like Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks and You've Got Mail, ALL. It's shocking. I think you could have a lot of fun with that. Like you guys have seen the videos of people dancing throughout the decades. I'm not saying you need to dance interpretive dance for Metaverse. That would be really weird. Although if anyone wants to do that and send it to me, I would not be averse to that. But you could take snippets of, here is how we've moved throughout the decades, from kind of the original computers, and I'm going to show my ignorance, I think the 70s. And then you can look at like kind of how technology has become consumed over time. And then you could say, we're in the business now of writing the future of events. If that's something that you want to be involved with, we are enabling that for people who really want to be known as groundbreakers, innovators, disruptors, whatever. It's exciting.
Well, it really helps with another kind of challenge that we have sometimes, which is the idea of hybrid events, where people are longing, to your point, about being in person, that human connection again. Like I just went to New York to meet our team a couple months ago, and having that conference room brainstorming session was really special. Like there's things you can do in a room together that maybe you can't do yet digitally. And I think defining the difference between those things and what Touchcast's stand is on fully virtual versus fully in person versus that spectrum of the middle kind of helps outline to the customer kind of, okay, this is how they're thinking about it, gives them an opportunity to challenge us and for us to get feedback on what the industry thinks about it. And then the layer deeper is like, where do all the vendors fit in to these different use cases, and where does Touchcast fit in on that spectrum? Because that is an issue that we run into a lot too, is like right now there's so much uncertainty of like, there's this new COVID variant, and like we were going to do these conferences in person next year and do different ones virtually, but now everything in person has to have a virtual component because you're getting so much more attendance and this all these data and analytics that you can never get in person. And so people are really struggling to figure out, how do they make hybrid work in this space?
But it's liberating, isn't it? Because it means that when you start to pitch to people, you don't have to be all or nothing. You know, you're able to say, look, whatever it is that you as a business want to be doing in terms of your future, Touchcast can work and flex around your needs as they evolve. You know, we're not just here to try and push you into a digital space. And I think probably finance and pharma are a little bit cold feet on that. Like, well, we don't want to go all in. We're nervous. We're naturally very conservative. We're not sure this is something we want to kind of put all our eggs in one basket. So being able to say that actually we're going to grow with you as your virtual event space grows. We want your feedback. We want you to challenge us. That is going to make you so strong in their mind that it's not about, there's a real security in that, in knowing that something will develop as you grow, rather than being, you must be part of this like future forward digital revolution. Because I do think that gives people really cold feet.
Yeah, and I think my guess is like your kind of ideal customer is in the corporate space, but I think you could probably draw parallels to maybe what's happening, or I think it's happening, not happened, in the entertainment space. I don't know why my mind thinks to like my teenager who, you know, they had a movie release or a concert in the video game he was playing, which
Probably Fortnite would be my guess.
100%, which is pretty wild. And so it, you know, tells me that these companies are saying, well, this is where our viewers are, not on TV, if anyone watches TV anymore, like just old school TV. And so I think like there'd be some interesting kind of like parallels to show, like this is what's happening in, you know, the entertainment space. And and just trying to help, you know, bridge that, because they might be going, yeah, we're hearing about that. And yeah, my teenager does it, but you know, a finance conference wouldn't happen there, but you know, it only takes a year or two and the whole thing can shift.
And that's where, and again, this is part of why I'm so bullish on where Touchcast is going, is like we've been set up where we've already been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, and specifically with virtual events and experiences, another 10 years before that with just video immersion. But this concept of bringing the enterprise into the digital space with their communications, I think the big corporates, the Fortune 500, the Fortune 2000, they struggle a little bit more than most companies do with being able to navigate this new direction that they could be going with digital. And so that's really where we're positioning ourselves in the market. Is like, we're not necessarily trying to help your local startup get together and meet in a virtual coffee space or something, right? Like, our whole focus is helping these corporate enterprises kind of navigate the space and level up. And I think that there has to be a collaboration with just the way that enterprise works. Every company is going to have some of their own objectives and own goals, and there's a struggle of trying to find the patterns across them, but everyone's going to have their unique asks that you kind of have to mold to a little bit. So that's the other thing, is when you're dealing with nothing but the biggest companies in the world, they all have their own opinions on this stuff too, right?
Patrick, you've been so quiet. I feel like you're in the metaverse selling an NFT to someone right now, or like you're like, guys, I'm already 2 levels ahead.
Yeah, I got the ginger beef NFT.
Was it you that bought the neighborhoods that someone paid like $450,000 to be Snoop Dogg's neighbor in the metaverse, which I think is an egregious display of wealth, but also
that was me, I have to admit.
He's got like one of the, him and his kids have like one of the biggest collections in the NFT space right now. It's kind of crazy.
So maybe everyone else understands this, but Ricky, hopefully you can educate me. When I think metaverse, I think like a digital version of myself, but like it already kind of exists. Like, I don't know, I feel like maybe it's a rebrand. Like, haven't we already been kind of in the metaverse? Like if I want, like when my kids are on a video game, that's not the metaverse. I don't know. Maybe can you give me the Coles Notes or the plain English description?
So just to preface this isn't Touchcast stance. This is just my own personal.
Okay.
But the way that I see the metaverse is like, it's really easy to jump to Ready Player One and this kind of future state that Facebook just kind of teased of like haptic suits where we can feel everything and we live in this fully virtual kind of matrix-like world. I don't see it that way though. I think you'll have a very small percentage of people that go that deep with it. I think you'll have a small percentage of people that don't touch it at all and are just purists of the world. I think for most of us, it's actually a synergetic world between digital and physical. So one piece of it is going to be taking things like social media and websites and making them 3-dimensional, having them live on the blockchain, fully transparent, this kind of Web3 leveled up version of the internet, the kind of next era of the internet. And it'll be more immersive and more engaging and more interesting and more secure and all these things. But there's another piece of it that I think is really under talked about, which is bringing the digital into the physical world. Like we're seeing little things in like Japan and China with 3-dimensional billboards, where it looks like the mascot of a sports team is jumping out at you on the street. There's Facebook talking about immersive glasses where you can take your Instagram story while you're playing whatever game you're playing with your friends, right? So like, I think that there's kind of that missing piece of it where it's not just all of us putting on VR goggles, it's actually just the next era of our digital and physical interaction. Hope that's helpful.
I think so. I think where I'm still challenged is, I have a LinkedIn profile, so I exist in that ecosystem. I have a Twitter profile, so I exist in. So I'm like, where's the Metaverse sign up so that I have a Metaverse profile? But I think there isn't one.
So there's multiple companies kind of competing for it, right? So you've got Decentraland, you have Sandbox, like you have companies kind of building their version of what they see the Metaverse being, and you can go in and buy digital property, which is what NFTs are. So NFTs could be a painting or art, but they could also be digital plots of land, digital houses. And the reality is you're going to have a very similar digital economy to what you have in the real world, where some people are going to learn how to build these things and create NFTs, and some people are going to want to buy them and pay someone else to make them. I don't think we're going to ever reach a place where it's this fully decentralized world that a lot of people in the crypto space want it to be. I think you're always like, just like in medieval times, if you're a warrior, you're not going to make your own sword. You're going to go to the blacksmith, have the blacksmith make your sword. You're going to go to the baker, have them bake your bread. I think we're going to see the same thing. We're just going to see new companies have an opportunity to grow rapidly and innovate. Like the big banks might not be the same big banks. It might be things like Coinbase. It's going to be very, very interesting.
Russ, I was thinking I'd like to go and meet you for a virtual pint, but now I have to go buy a virtual property and find a virtual pub and then buy a virtual pint. Like, I think it's easier for me to fly down to Austin. And...
I think it might be. This stuff, I've got to
probably cheaper too.
This stuff goes so far over my head. I'm trying to keep up. And I'm wondering, like, in terms of, I know we're on a bit of a tangent, but it got me thinking about the people who, like with event marketers, event managers, event producers who are old school, like they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, or even 10 or 20 years, and they're just so passionate about the physical live events. This must be like frightening in some ways. So, and what I kept coming back to in my mind was, really important to position it not as, you're a dinosaur, you're out, we're in, and this is what's happening. So move with it, evolve. And I think to things like traditional marketing, print advertising, I work in digital marketing. Everyone said, traditional advertising, traditional media is going to die and digital will be it. But obviously they work together. And then over time, we're figuring out more and more ways to make them integrate and work more and more closely together. So I feel like there's, there's something in there for you to speak to those old school event people who, for them, this is just terrifying, and for ways that you can help, like I say before, bring out that creativity that they've got and have it complement the live events as well. Do you speak to many of those?
I think that's such an important point. And it's part of what I was saying, even with the metaverse, of like this kind of forgotten piece of the puzzle of like taking it out of digital and into the real world is really important too. Like you see a lot of agencies that do mixed reality booths and things like that at their events, and they're incredible. Like these kind of holographic displays and things that you can do in the real world is also advancing and innovating in a really special way. And so I actually think, like, between events, but also like in the retail space, like that's a really untapped thing right now. Like you're seeing Whole Foods and Nike, maybe Apple, like there's a couple of companies doing a good job of innovating and creating really new and interesting ways to take a physical space and interact with their customers. But for the most part, there really hasn't been a lot of innovation. Like I think the last 2 years were so chaotic that it started with people just scrambling around going, what tools do I have that I can piecemeal something together? Let's go to Zoom, let's go to Teams, like let's throw our budget at whatever we can do to try and make it interesting. Some people were making feature films essentially for their events, right? Like people, like when I was in the video space, worked with a company where we did skits with sales leaders, where we sent video production crews to each of their VPs of sales and created this little short film, essentially, to like make it a little humorous, have some fun with it. But I think that that's an area where we need more innovation. We need people thinking about, what does the new physical world look like? Now that we're all coming out of our hidey holes and the world's coming back to normal a little bit, like, how can we make it better? Like, instead of just sitting with the same brick and mortar system that's been kind of dipping down with e-com.
Well, and I don't know about everybody else, but I kind of went through like these ebbs and flows where I was like, I was craving the human interactions, and we were all stuck in our, home offices. So we were happy to jump on these. And then after a while, you're like, okay, another happy hour. And then it was like another virtual conference. But then, it's kind of like that. I hate using the word new normal, but you're probably not going to get to do the physical one. So what's the best version of that? And I think that's what people are trying to land on. And you guys are trying to, hit as close as you can, because physical events aren't going away, but they're going to be obviously a lot less frequent.
Well, and look, we're going to be having a presence at CES, right? That's a physical event. We're a digital virtual experiences company. And we really don't see ourselves as a virtual events company. It's more like a virtual experiences company, because events is our most popular use case, but we also do a lot of internal communications and learning and development experiences and all these other things, right? Investor relations. And so we have a presence. Like, we have a booth at CES coming up where we're decking out like a really cool physical environment. And I can't talk about all of it yet, but we're going to have some pretty cool things on display to show how we can bring the metaverse into the physical world too. And so if any of you guys are there, it'd be great to grab that pint and actually show you what we're putting together,
I think definitely, Ricky, when you are speaking to the old school event managers and I'd be saying exactly that. Like, this is going to be both. We're a tech company. We're going to be at a live event ourselves. Like, these things are one's not replacing the other. We understand that, but we just want to make this other part amazing and elevate the whole industry.
Definitely.
Yeah. I see we got 5 minutes left. I don't know if you have any other specific questions, or if you want to wrap it up. It's totally up to you, Ricky. I mean, this has been interesting, and appreciate you putting time together to show it to us.
No, I just want to share some gratitude for you guys. Like, this was kind of a random thing that JJ hit me up and just said, hey, there's this opportunity. Does anyone want to jump on and try it out? And pleasantly surprised, like, some really great feedback. I actually was already following some of you guys on LinkedIn for a while, so it's kind of cool to put faces to the profile picture. And it's been really productive for me. So just want to say, I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yeah. Well, and likewise, thanks, Eloise, Russ, and Patrick. This will be the last clip of the year. So we'll see everybody else. And man, I can't believe I'm saying 2022. That's crazy. But yeah, thank you everybody for carving out an hour. Have a great holiday break, and have a great weekend.
Happy holidays. See you guys.
Everybody.
See you
See you in the
guys.
metaverse. Frank.